Trump puts Europe on notice. Go get your own oil. Is this Bible prophecy? Trump just declared something that could change everything in the Middle East. You will be shocked by 4 facts about this. Number 1. What Trump just said. Let me break down exactly what Trump said, because every line carries strategic, economic, and prophetic weight. And the statement was not a single off-the-cuff remark. It was a series of calculated posts on Truth Social, released on March 31st, 2026, day 32 of Operation Epic Fury. And together, they constitute the most aggressive public demand an American president has ever made of allied nations regarding their own security. The first post targeted the United Kingdom and the broader group of European nations that depend on the Strait of Hormuz for energy. And here's the full text. All of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number 1, buy from the US. We have plenty. And number 2, build up some delayed courage. Go to the Strait and just take it. You have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil. The nation that stood with the United States in every major conflict since World War II. And Trump publicly accuses it of refusing to participate in the operation that dismantled Iran's regime. The alliance that was supposed to be unbreakable is being publicly shamed. But here's what makes the second line even more significant. Because it doesn't just criticize, it offers an alternative. I have a suggestion for you. Number 1, buy from the US. We have plenty. America as the energy supplier, not the energy protector. The United States, now the world's largest oil and gas producer, positioning itself not as the guardian of Middle Eastern energy, but as the replacement for it. Buy from us. We don't need Hormuz. You do. Now, here's why this statement hit the diplomatic world like an earthquake. Because it violates every assumption the post-World War II order was built on. Since 1945, the United States has served as the guarantor of global energy security. American naval power, the Fifth Fleet in the Persian Gulf, carrier strike groups in the Mediterranean, bases across the Middle East, has ensured that oil flows freely from the Gulf to the markets that consume it. Europe didn't need its own energy security apparatus because America provided one. Japan didn't need to protect its tanker routes because American warships did it. The entire global economy was built on the assumption that the United States would always be there, patrolling, protecting, deterring. But here's what makes Trump's statement the first public acknowledgement that the arrangement may be ending. Because no previous president has ever told allied nations to conduct their own military operations to secure energy routes. Not during the 1973 oil embargo, not during the Iran-Iraq War, not during the Gulf War, not during any previous disruption of the Strait of Hormuz. This is not how the system normally works. And the fact that it's happening now, in the middle of the most intense Middle Eastern conflict in decades, tells you that the system is not just under stress. It may be undergoing a permanent transformation. Now, here's what triggered the statement. Because Trump didn't wake up one morning and decide to alienate European allies. The crisis forced the confrontation. The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide, carrying approximately 20% of the world's oil, has been effectively disrupted since Iran activated its denial systems in response to Operation Epic Fury. Naval mines in the shipping lanes, IRGC fast attack boats patrolling the approaches, anti-ship missile batteries covering the transit routes, commercial shipping frozen, insurance premiums at levels that make transit economically impossible, even for vessels willing to risk the physical danger. But here's what made the disruption a European crisis, rather than just a Middle Eastern one. Because the United States is the world's largest oil and gas producer. The UK imports a significant portion of its jet fuel and heating oil through supply chains that originate in the Gulf. Germany depends on LNG that transits through Hormuz. France, which, according to Trump, wouldn't even let military supply flights cross its airspace, relies on the same energy infrastructure that Iran has just shut down. Europe has no backup. No alternative supplier that doesn't involve either the nation that just told it to fend for itself or the choke point that Iran just shut down. And the realization hitting European capitals right now with the force of a diplomatic bunker buster is that the energy security they assumed was permanent was always borrowed. Borrowed from American military power. And the loan has just been called. Now, here's the scenario that European capitals are confronting right now. Because the implications of American withdrawal from energy security are staggering. If the United States steps back from protecting the Strait of Hormuz, Europe must protect it. That means European navies, which have been allowed to atrophy for decades under the American security umbrella, must project power into the Persian Gulf. It means mine-clearing operations, anti-submarine warfare, air defense, the kind of sustained naval operations that require carrier groups, logistics chains, and forward bases that most European nations no longer possess. But here's what makes the military dimension only part of the problem. Because the economic consequences begin immediately. Without American security guarantees, insurance premiums for Gulf shipping explode. Lloyd's of London reclassifies the region. Tankers stop transiting, not because they're hit, but because they can't afford the insurance to try. And the oil that Europe depends on stays in the Gulf. And here's what makes the political dimension the most destabilizing. Because energy crises produce political crises. Governments fall when heating bills double. Parties collapse when fuel shortages close factories. And the political instability that energy vulnerability produces creates exactly the kind of desperate, frightened, willing to accept any solution population that the Bible describes as the precondition for the rise of a new global system. Now, here's where I need to transition, because the geopolitical analysis is what it is. Documented, verified, quoted directly from the president's own posts. But the question millions of people are asking goes beyond politics and oil markets. When global alliances begin to fracture, when the security architecture that has held the Western world together for 80 years shows cracks this deep, prophecy watchers pay attention. Not because they're looking for political ammunition, but because the Bible describes an end-times world where the alliance structures of the present era have been replaced by a fundamentally different configuration of power. And the fracture between America and Europe, the first public rupture of the Western alliance over energy security, moves the geopolitical picture closer to the prophetic picture than any previous diplomatic crisis. Now here's what the Bible describes about the alignment of nations in the last days. Because the prophetic picture is not a single superpower protecting a global system. It is a fractured, multipolar world where regional powers compete, alliances shift, and the vacuum left by the withdrawal of the dominant power is filled by a new system. Ezekiel 38 describes a coalition: Gog, Magog, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, Gomer, Togarmah, that moves against Israel. The coalition is regional, not global. It consists of nations from the north, the east, and the south of Israel. And notably, critically, it does not include any nation that scholars associate with Western Europe or North America. But here's what makes that absence so significant. Because the most powerful military alliance in the history of the world is the NATO alliance, led by the United States. And Ezekiel's coalition does not include it. The nations that dominate the present-day security architecture, the ones Trump just told to fend for themselves, are absent from the end times military picture. And here's the question that absence raises. Because for the Western powers to be absent from the Ezekiel 38 scenario, something must have happened to remove them from the equation. Whether that something is military decline, economic collapse, internal division, or simply the kind of alliance fracture that Trump's statement represents, the Western powers must, at some point, become irrelevant to the Middle Eastern military picture. And the "Go Get Your Own Oil" statement is the first time in the modern era that an American president has publicly signaled that America's role in that picture may be ending. And here's what makes the current war so directly relevant to the prophetic picture. Because the nation being dismantled by Operation Epic Fury is the nation Ezekiel names first in the coalition. Ezekiel 38:5. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Persia, modern Iran, its military capability reduced by 90%, its navy destroyed, its ammunition depots burning. And yet, Ezekiel places it in a future coalition that invades Israel, which means that between now and the Ezekiel 38 invasion, Iran must recover enough to participate, or it must be integrated into a larger coalition that compensates for its weakness with the strength of its allies. But here's what makes the alliance dynamics so significant. Because a weakened Iran is a dependent Iran, and a dependent Iran looks for patrons: Russia, Turkey. The nations Ezekiel lists as the core of the coalition. The war that is dismantling Iran's independent military capability may be the very mechanism that drives it into the alliance Ezekiel described. Now, here's the observation that most prophecy teaching doesn't emphasize enough. Because the absence of Western powers from the end times military picture is as significant as the presence of the nations that are listed. Ezekiel 38 lists specific nations. It does not list the United States. It does not list the United Kingdom. It does not list France, Germany, or any European power. The most that scholars identify is a possible reference to Tarshish and its young lions in Ezekiel 38:13, a verse that describes nations who question the invasion but do not intervene to stop it. And here's what makes that description so striking in light of Trump's statement. Because questioning but not intervening is exactly the posture Trump is describing for America's relationship with Middle Eastern security. We'll observe, we'll comment, we'll sell you oil, but we won't fight for you. The young lions who ask questions but don't send armies, that is the posture of a nation that has stepped back from its role as global protector. This raises a deeper question, one that the Bible answers, but that most geopolitical analysis doesn't even ask. What happens to Western dominance? Where does it go? Now, here's the historical pattern that should make every person watching this think carefully. Because empires don't fall in a single dramatic collapse. They withdraw. They retract. They pull back from commitments that once defined their identity. And the withdrawal happens not because they're defeated, but because they're exhausted. Rome didn't fall in a day. It withdrew from Britain, from Gaul, from the provinces it could no longer afford to defend. and the provinces, left without the security they had assumed was permanent, were overrun by the forces that Rome had been holding back. Britain didn't lose its empire in a single battle. It withdrew from India, from Africa, from the Middle East, nation by nation, commitment by commitment, as the cost of maintaining the system exceeded the will to sustain it. But here's what makes the American withdrawal from energy security different from previous imperial contractions. Because it is voluntary. It is not driven by military defeat. It is driven by strategic choice. America has the energy. America has the military. America simply doesn't want to continue paying the cost of protecting nations that refuse to help. And that voluntary withdrawal from the richest, most militarily powerful nation in history may be the most significant strategic shift of the 21st century. Scene 17. Jesus' warning about the times. Now here's what Jesus said about the atmosphere that precedes the events Revelation describes, because his words in Matthew 24 capture not just the wars, but the systemic instability that the wars produce. Matthew 24, 6-8. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, and there shall be famines. But here's the phrase that tells you where we are on the prophetic timeline. The beginning of sorrows, birth pains, contractions. Not the delivery yet, but the contractions are intensifying. Militarily, economically, diplomatically, and now structurally, as the alliance system itself begins to fracture. Scene 18. Why this is not fulfillment yet. Now, here's where I maintain the guardrails, because Trump's statement, however consequential, is not a prophetic event. It is a political one. No final system has emerged. No beast government controls the global economy. No mark has been implemented. The Ezekiel 38 coalition has not formed. The tribulation has not begun. The specific, identifiable, non-negotiable events that the prophetic timeline requires have not occurred. Furthermore, Trump's posture could change. The next administration could reverse course. European nations could develop their own energy security. The Strait of Hormuz could be reopened through diplomacy. The crisis could resolve without producing the systemic transformation that the prophets describe. But here's what the honest assessment also requires. Because the direction of the shift matters, even if the destination hasn't been reached. The Western alliance is fracturing over energy security for the first time in 80 years. The American security guarantee is being publicly questioned by the American president. European vulnerability is exposed in a way that has no modern precedent. And the conditions that would make a new global system necessary, energy dependency, alliance collapse, economic desperation, are more advanced today than at any previous point in the post-World War II era. This is not the prophetic fulfillment, but the trajectory is moving toward the prophetic picture. Now, here's what I mean by stage setting, because the pieces the prophecy requires are assembling even though the prophecy itself has not been fulfilled. The Western alliance is weakening. Trump's statement is the most visible crack, but the structural tensions have been building for years. European dependence on Middle Eastern energy is exposed, and no alternative has been developed. The Strait of Hormuz, the choke point that controls the flow, is under Iranian control. and the diplomatic framework being negotiated, Kushner, Witkoff, the April 6th deadline, could produce the kind of comprehensive regional agreement that Daniel 9:27 describes. But here's what makes the energy dimension the most critical piece of stage setting. Because the beast system of Revelation 13 requires a world where economic participation is controlled, and a world where energy access is conditional, where you must comply with a system to receive the fuel, the food, the goods that sustain life, is a world where economic control is already normalized. The mark of the beast doesn't arrive in a world where everyone has free access to energy. It arrives in a world where access has already been made conditional, where systems of compliance have already been established, where the habit of obeying in order to receive has already been formed. The stage is being set, not through a single dramatic event, through the gradual, systemic, seemingly rational restructuring of the global order, one truth social post at a time. So what should you be watching in the days and weeks ahead? Because the statement has been made, the fracture is visible, and the consequences are unfolding. Watch for Europe's response. If European nations begin conducting independent military operations in the Persian Gulf, mine clearing, naval patrols, convoy protection, the post-American security order has begun forming. But here's what makes the second indicator even more significant, because it's the one that tells you whether the energy system is being permanently restructured. Watch for new energy agreements. If European nations sign bilateral energy deals with Gulf states, deals that include security provisions, compliance requirements, and economic conditions, the framework for a conditional energy system is being built. And conditional energy access is the precursor to conditional economic participation. Watch for the Hormuz resolution. If the strait is reopened through a multinational agreement, not American military action, the template for a post-American security architecture is established. And the authority or framework that brokers that agreement gains the kind of global influence that the prophets describe. And watch for the alliance realignment. Every crack in the Western alliance pushes nations toward alternative security arrangements. Every withdrawal of American protection forces European nations to find new partners. And the partners they find, or the system they create, may be the embryonic form of the structure the prophets described. Because it is the question every person watching this must eventually confront. What happens when the systems people trust begin to change? When the alliance you assumed was permanent shows cracks? When the energy supply you took for granted is suddenly conditional? When the nation that protected you says, "Handle it yourself"? When the order you built your life on reveals that it was always temporary, always dependent on arrangements that could be revoked at any moment? And here's what the Bible says about systems. Because every system humanity has ever built eventually fails. Every alliance eventually fractures. Every empire eventually withdraws. Every security guarantee eventually expires. And the person who built their security on the system, on the alliance, the economy, the energy supply, the political arrangement, discovers, when the system changes, that their foundation was never as solid as they believed. The only foundation that doesn't shift is the one that wasn't built by human hands. Now let me make sure you understand what this message is about, because I have not shown you these things to generate political opinion. I have shown you these things to generate spiritual awareness. The "Go Get Your Own Oil" statement is real. The alliance fracture is real. The energy crisis is real. And the prophetic connections, while not yet fulfilled, are real enough that millions of people are asking questions about the future that they have never asked before. The foundation that holds when alliances fracture and systems change is not an energy supply. It is not a security guarantee. It is not a military alliance or a diplomatic framework or a barrel of oil. It is Christ. And the time to build on that foundation is not when the system collapses. It is now.